You're listening to Talk with Audrey. The coronavirus pandemic has reminded us all about the power and importance of helping each other. For many people, there seems to be little that they can do to help scientists find medical treatments for coronavirus, or they might even be unsure how to get involved in the fight against COVID-19. My guest today is Juan Hindo. She's a corporate social responsibility manager at IBM, and we're going to talk about their World Community Grid project on coronavirus. It's called OpenPandemics COVID-19. We're going to talk about that and also the potential for the research and how everyone can get involved and join the fight against COVID-19. Welcome.
Thanks, Audrey.
I appreciate you joining me. You guys are busy doing lots of really innovative projects when it comes to using technology to gather information and also help make people's lives easier and even across food sourcing, everything. So tell us about this World Community Grid project.
World Community Grid really was designed as a way to for anyone to help scientists tackling all kinds of problems. And so on OpenPandemics specifically, we've partnered with researchers at Scripps Research in California who are looking for treatment options to fight COVID-19. And to do that, they kind of have to figure out which of millions of chemical compounds could work against the disease. That's really not very practical to do in a traditional lab setting. It's really expensive. It could take years and years and years. And, that's not really realistic when you're in the middle of a pandemic. The good thing, though, is that a lot of this traditional lab work can now be simulated on a computer. So scientists can use software to mimic what would happen in the lab. And this means they get to skip a bunch of the trial and error and really sort of hone in on, promising candidates amongst those millions of possibilities that they can then take to the lab. The challenge, though, is that these simulations need a ton of computing and processing power. And that's where we and our volunteer community kind of come in. And that's why IBM created World Community Grid, really as a way for researchers like the ones at Scripps to take these millions of simulations and spread them out amongst our volunteers. And each of our volunteers would install the World Community Grid app on their computer or Android device. And in doing that, you get to run one of these simulations on your device, to help the scientists at Scripps hopefully find a treatment for COVID-19.
So it's sort of crowdsourcing power, right?
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of taking what is sort of this big problem, breaking it down into small pieces, and distributing it to volunteers. And for the volunteers, think of it as just as you might donate your time or money to a cause. Here you're donating your unused computing power that otherwise would have gone to waste. And here you get to actually put it to use and get it to do some science work on behalf of the researchers.
So define unused computer power.
So what we mean when we say unused computing power is, for example, while we're chatting right now, or if I'm checking my email or reading an article online, my computer isn't really being used to its kind of full potential. So it's not really doing as much work as it could. And therefore, any kind of computing power that's just sitting there, not really being used, can instead be actually used to run one of these simulations. So we're, essentially asking volunteers to give up something that would have gone to waste anyway. And as a volunteer, you kind of get to pick and choose, what time of the day you want the app to run, how many hours per day, under what conditions you want the application to run. But besides that, it's just really using whatever you're not, essentially.
And would volunteers be able to see the work that the app is doing?
Yes. So first of all, you can pick and choose which research project to support. OpenPandemics is one of a number of projects that we're currently running on World Community Grid. And both through the app and through our website, you can see which calculations or simulations you're running, what status they're in, if it's completed, if it's been sent back to the researchers yet or not. And we also really work with the researchers to kind of keep the volunteers up to date about the overall sort of status of the project. And, are you receiving the results? Have you started analysis? What are your findings? What's the next phase of work? We put a lot of effort into kind of communicating that back to the volunteers so they get to appreciate and know how they're helping the scientists.
And how do people get involved if they want to participate in the World Community Grid?
So you start by going to worldcommunitygrid.org. From there, you install the World Community Grid app on your computer or Android device. You pick which projects you want to support, which causes, and that's it. You're good to go.
Well, as simple as that. Interesting. So you don't have no qualifications other than you have to have a computer, either, I guess, a Mac or an Android device. Install the app and tell the app when it can use the power of your computer to work.
Yeah. So a Mac, a Windows, a Linux, or an Android device, you install the software. By default, it's actually configured to be really unobtrusive, but you can just, change those settings if you want. But like you said, you install the app, you pick the project, and that's it. You don't need any kind of scientific or technical background.
What other information are you trying to get? Because I know that app has a number of different projects, but the overall goal of OpenPandemics COVID-19 is what?
There's really two goals for OpenPandemics. The first is to find treatment options specifically for COVID-19. The second, though, is unfortunately scientists believe that this isn't going to be our last pandemic, and we will have challenges like this in the future. And so what they want to do is develop tools and ways of tackling these problems more efficiently. So they want to develop tools around drug discovery that can help us tackle the next pandemic even more efficiently and more quickly. And because we have an open data policy at World Community Grid, they've committed to making everything, whether it's their data or their tools and methods, all of it publicly available. So the cool thing is, as a volunteer, you're not just benefiting the researchers at Scripps, but your contribution really gets to benefit all scientists trying to tackle pandemics in the future.
Wow. And I also read here that you guys have had 30 research projects supported, including studies on cancer, Ebola, Zika, influenza, muscular dystrophy, malaria, and AIDS, and as well as projects for developing better water filtration systems and solar energy collection. What result, if you just pick one of those and give us the results of the study thus far?
I'll pick the childhood cancer project as an example because they use very similar techniques to the ones that are being used on OpenPandemics, where they really set out to look for treatment options for neuroblastoma, which is a common and pretty dangerous type of childhood cancer. And through their work on World Community Grid, they were able to discover a handful of candidates that were shown to work against neuroblastoma with fairly minimal side effects. So we know that this model can work, and we've seen it happen over and over again when our community of volunteers sort of rallies behind one of these projects.
Amazing. Let me ask one more question, and that is about privacy. Everyone, I'm sure, is going to wonder about the privacy of their own information on their computer as the app is running. Is IBM's World Community Grid collecting any information outside of the research calculations that are being done?
Absolutely not. As you can imagine, we take security and privacy really seriously. That's kind of in our DNA at IBM anyway. But the app doesn't really access any of your personal files or data on your machine. We also bring in IBM security experts to test our systems constantly for any kind of vulnerabilities. And then the scientific data within each simulation is only going back and forth between your machine as a volunteer and the World Community Grid servers on the IBM cloud. So it's not like your device is in any way connected to the other volunteers' devices or anything like that. And, we've had hundreds of thousands of people trust us, and actually not just individuals, but also organizations, including big corporations and banks that run World Community Grid on their computers.
Wow, who knew? It's so fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. what you're able to do remotely. And I'm going to sign up for this. Sounds like a great way to make a contribution, to provide energy. Give it some fuel, right, to run.
Absolutely. And we'd love to have you in our volunteer community and your listeners, too.
Yeah, it's a great way to help. Where can people go for information and to download the app, please?
The website is worldcommunitygrid.org.
All right. You guys heard that, worldcommunitygrid.org. My guest has been Juan Hindo, the Corporate Social Responsibility Manager for IBM, and we've been talking about the World Community Grid project on coronavirus called OpenPandemics COVID-19. If you download the app, there are some other options. If there are other projects you'd like to be part of, check it out. Informs Empowered. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
My pleasure.